Good evening. This is a meeting of the Board of Trustees of Village of Sleepy Hollow. Will you please rise with me as we say the Pledge of Allegiance? Please remain standing. Every 2 weeks in our regular meetings, we remember those members of our community who have passed since our last meeting. Since our last meeting, we lost Michael Russo at the young age of 59, currently of Haverstraw, but a long-time Sleepy Hollow resident. Thoughts with his family and with his friends. Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, we are going to have a presentation later on this evening from Norma Drummond from Westchester County Planning Department. She is running between a bunch of different municipalities this evening, and my plan is that when she gets here, we'll put her on for her presentation on the census, and then we'll go back to wherever we were in the agenda at that point. I'm expecting more like around 7:30 or so when she'll get here. She has to leave for another appointment after she's here, so that's why I want to get her on and then be able to get to her next meeting. All right, we have a warrant which was distributed earlier. For the record, it's $671.55. If there's any questions on the warrant, please to raise them now.
Motion to approve the warrant.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? And the warrant is approved. We have the minutes of September 10th, 2019.
Motion to approve the minutes of September 10th, 2019.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? And the minutes are approved. Thank you. Our next item is the mayor's announcements. I'm going to hold off on those for a moment, and we'll get to them later on in the meeting, and I'm going to move on to the administrator's report. Mr. Giacchio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few projects going on in the village. Curbing is being done on Harwood, Monroe, and Kelbourne as part of our curbing improvement project that we're doing. Paving has been done in Sleepy Hollow Manor. We met with Con Edison 2 weeks ago for requests to pave Lawrence, Hudson Street, and Lower Beekman, and we expect that to happen over the next few weeks. We also informed them regarding our upcoming Halloween events and how important it is to get New Broadway in good condition. It's currently being worked on, so we're hoping that they will get finished with that job. I don't know if it'll be paved in time for the Halloween events, but they did assure us that they'll do the best they can to improve the road for our two events, which include the hayride as well as Halloween itself, where we closed down New Broadway. This past weekend, we had our street fair, a very successful street fair. In fact, maybe the most attended street fair in recent years. Also, this past weekend was the first ever film festival, Sleepy Hollow Film Festival, of which we didn't organize, but we helped facilitate. Matt Aron from the Recreation Department and myself met with them several times to help them get off the ground for the first year. It was highly successful. They had a Disney fan club, had an event at Kingsland, which was very successful, and we've been trying to get Disney here for many years, so that was a good sign that our tourism efforts are paying off. The sewer line that we've been working, water line rather, that we've been working on with Briarcliff and Tarrytown, the project has been completed. We're waiting for approvals from the DEP as well as Westchester County to get it in service. It needs to be in service in November because the Catskill Aqueduct will be shut down for maintenance. We've been working, Rich Gross and I have been meeting with Briarcliff and Tarrytown monthly, and we hope to get that approvals in time for the shutdown. So we have a sewer line blockage on Continental that our water department has been working on since Friday. More to follow on that with regards to what the repair is going to entail. It's going to be fairly expensive. There's a total blockage of the sewer, and it's fairly deep, so it's going to be a fairly expensive fix. We won't know that until we have the engineer's report. Chief Boetti is going to mention this, but I'll mention it as well. We met with the parking consultant for Lower Beekman because I know that Edge and Hudson has been asking us for guidance on what we're going to be doing down there in terms of lining the streets, meters, et cetera. And we expect the consultant to come to a work session to present her recommendations. And let's see, upcoming events, we have next week as our, not only our hayride on the 25th, 26th, we're going to be having a meeting this week to discuss that, but we also have the 10K run on the 26th. So we got a lot coming up. So far, so good with our events. I think we're 5 for 5. We've had some great weather and great turnout for all of our events starting in September. So, and one other point, there'll be hydrant flushing 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. this week in the Inner Village and at Weber Park and on River Street. So you may have experienced brown water. If you do, just run the water until it clears. And that's my report.
Anthony, quick question. Are we sold out on the hayride yet?
We are sold out on the hayride.
Wow,
We were sold out, I think, 2 weeks ago.
that's amazing.
Still tickets for the kids at the,
We still have tickets
Some.
for residents can come in here at Village Hall for the kids. We still have tickets for that.
okay, thank you.
So we want to see proof of residency in order to get a ticket now? Okay.
We just want to make sure that
Student
they can get
tickets.
it. They still have tickets.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Giacchio? Thank you, sir. We'll move on to Police Department. Chief Boetti. Nice silence. That's probably
Good evening. We'll get our analytical data out of the way first. Thus far this year, we've responded to 15,502 calls for service, made 205 arrests, and have written 2,600 summonses. Last Friday, you may have noticed we participated in an evacuation drill from the high school, the middle school, John Paulding, and Morse. That was successful. It started at 1:15 with Morse, and all kids were relocated, signifying some kind of a disaster or catastrophe that happened at the school. It was extremely successful. All kids were dismissed from their evacuation site, whether it was Immaculate Conception Church, the COC in Terrytown, or St. Teresa's Church down on Beekman. We also participated in the mass casualty drill with Phelps in Terrytown on September 19th. That went off very well. The 29th or 30th, we're going to do a safety seminar with the kids from Moore School as far as Halloween safety. Basically, signifying be seen, be safe, be smart, or our little acronym that we use when we try to get across to the kids. We also trying to secure some glow sticks that these kids could attach to their costumes to help them be a little bit more visible. Uh, The Historic Hudson Valley is well on its way. They've hired 2 officers for each night, starting from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. One officer is assisting with the Old Dutch Church crossing. The other one is inside the grounds of the Phelps Manor Restoration. They had a minor incident last year, and they sought our help just to keep it from becoming a major incident this year. I just want to remind everybody, Halloween is the 31st, and we will be closing New Broadway again. The time's probably be right around dusk. As usual, we will do the best we can to get any residents coming home late to their residence or as close as we possibly can. We'll be sending out more thorough notice through the clerk's office later next week. And as the administrator said, the street fair on Saturday was absolutely phenomenal rather. I haven't seen that volume of people at the street fair in a very long time, and everybody looked like they were having a great time. The weather finally cooperated. We also met with the parking consultant, and for the first phase, we decided to be focused on that lower Beekman area. I believe the administrator sent you out an email with some guidance as which are options on how we could monitor the parking in that location. She will hopefully be presenting this Tuesday to you guys, and her plan is very good because it will integrate with that edge on Hudson parking. And I think that was a great idea because some people may be parking there to access that site and vice versa. So they are intertwinable. And that is all I have. If you have any questions.
I do, Chief, in the past, we've gotten requests from the Weber Park community asking to close New Broadway to non-residential car traffic on Halloween. I'm not sure if we got a request this year or not. It was always a good idea in the past because it's New Broadway and the other streets, and they're
We have
Pretty-
not gotten a
pretty
request,
tight.
but we are going to close it to non-residential traffic. Essentially, what we'll do is allow them to come in if they want to drop off kids for safety. We'll put horses beyond the circle, which will give them a nice turnaround, drop off their kids, and then pull out and find parking elsewhere before it gets congested further down on New Broadway.
Okay, great. Any questions for the chief?
I just have a further question in regards to New Broadway. Knowing that Con Edison is trying to do their best to get out of the area, will there be any vehicles there? Can they move them for that day? Because it's already going to be tricky enough.
We will contact them, have a meeting so they can button it up as best as they can.
Okay,
You know, for hopefully eliminate all tripping hazards.
that would be great.
also.
Because there's going to be a lot of,
Yes, it
Pitfalls.
seems that it is the hotspot of the village.
sure. But they've been
This
leaving
time.
some vehicles there. Maybe we can suggest that they move them for that day
We-
as well?
We definitely will.
Thank you.
Any other questions for chief? Thank you, chief. We'll move on to the building department. Mr. McCarthy? Thank you.
Good evening. I just handed you the monthly report for September. Under permit activity, we issued 85 permits, 18 certificates of occupancy, 3 updated certificates, and conducted 9 property record searches. That work brought in just over $130,000. Under our budget, we spent just over $180,000, not including payroll. The zoning board met on September 18th. They approved variances for a new porch on Weber Avenue, a new deck on Howard Street, as well as a major addition alteration on New Broadway, and also an addition alteration and conversion up on Hudson Terrace. The next zoning board meeting will be Wednesday this month. at 8 o'clock. The planning board met on September 19th. They approved an amended resolution for the River Rock Supply property on Broadway. And they also scheduled a public hearing for the final subdivision plot, which is a 3-lot subdivision on Weber Avenue. As well as they approved the architectural design for the Block I buildings down at Edge on Hudson. They were actually originally approved under the Phase 1 approval, but there was a condition of that resolution that required them to come back for the final design. There was a couple adjustments made, and that was all approved. Under development down at the Edge on Hudson project, the Phase 2 infrastructure is underway. A major feat was last month was installing the stormwater discharge into the Hudson River, in which a cofferdam was constructed. Major excavation was underway. A barge was hit, an old barge was hit, and as well as some other things, and however, the pipe was successfully put in, and it's been backfilled, and the shoring has been removed already. This will reopen the temporary riverwalk area again. On the Toll Brothers site, the second of townhouse structure is underway. So we have actually 12 units currently under full construction, as well as other permits for piles and foundations have been issued. Also, the Toll Brothers have started construction under the Block I buildings, the 3 apartment buildings. The pile rig was actually just delivered yesterday, and pile driving could start this week at any time now. Also under development, a new house up on Ridge Street is underway, and the framing is just about completed, enclosing the roof probably this week. Under code enforcement, there were 16 complaints filed, 9 violations issued, and 2 appearance tickets. Building court was held on the 26th. There was 13 cases on the calendar. 4 cases were resolved, resulting in just over $1,000 in fines. And the next court date for buildings will be on October 24th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Attached in the package is also a summary of the building permit activity. There's also a chart showing our revenue status per month for the past 3 years. And there's also some photographs in there of the different development projects under construction, as well as the agendas for the meetings for the zoning and planning boards.
So Sean, it was a big month in terms of revenue, which is great, and I can see it's mostly coming from building permits. And is
This-
that toll primarily?
Yeah, there's a flag on the chart which says Edge on Hudson, and in particular, that was for the Block E, E1 building, which is the 17-unit condominium complex. The full building permit was issued last month on that project, which sums up a spike in the revenue.
Well, we should be seeing some more spikes soon. Might have to
Yes.
get larger paper.
Actually, I had to adjust the margins on that to go up over the $100,000 threshold to fit on the
There you go.
paper, yes.
Sean, do you know how many units have been sold down at Edge?
No, I don't.
Okay.
The information is accessible on the Toll Brothers website if you want to check.
Sure.
They do have a chart there showing which units are in contract and which ones are sold.
Okay, excellent.
I just don't know offhand
No, it's fine.
to date, sorry.
Any update on the status of construction for the former Horseman site as well as the sushi restaurant across the street?
So the former Sushi Raku restaurant is, all permits have been issued. They're under construction now. We're actually doing a footing inspection there, I believe, tomorrow. The entire building has been gutted, and we'll receive all new mechanical systems, plumbing, electrical, fire sprinklers, There's a small outdoor terrace area that's being constructed, as well as a permanent storage facility. They actually tore down an old shed that was there, and it's going to be a permanent structure attached to the building now. There'll be new signage, new facade treatments.
They're going to have the same amount of parking on that site?
Yes, same parking. Across the street, however, last week, the contractor pulled out of the job. So that's on hold right now. We're in contact with the owners of the property to see what the status is of hiring a new contractor for the project, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Do you know what the status is of the VFW building?
Sure.
Uh-huh.
The planning board approved that project last year. All permits have been issued. They're currently started repainting the facade.
I saw that.
Yeah.
And they're beginning some interior work. They're putting in new bathrooms and doing some interior renovations.
Okay, great,
That's underway, too.
thank you.
Anything else for Mr. McCarthy?
Yeah, sent us an email today about some requested revisions and amendments. So what's the next step with that?
So that's down at, that's
Sam, use that.
phase one of the Edge on Hudson project. The developer came back with 3 amendments to the phase one site plan application. The planning board has looked at it already, and they're, just to review what the changes are for you. One is to remove the restroom structure at the east end, I would call it, of the Central Park area. The second change is to eliminate temporarily the temporary cul-de-sac at the end of Legend Drive, down by the I-block buildings. The reason for that, by the way, is that there's a temporary structure that was going to be constructed until the Phase 3 portion of the road work connected to it. However, the planning board and our department has recommended to the developer to just proceed with placing that cul-de-sac at its permanent location instead of eliminating it. And then the third revision was changes, or really the final landscape plan for the roundabout down at the base of Beekman Avenue. So far, that's the only outstanding item, that they're still considering the designs for that space. They'll be back to the planning board this Thursday also.
Is the restroom moving to another location on the site?
There has been discussions about where that will go.
Mm-hmm.
It has not been finalized yet.
But there will be a public restroom,
I hope so.
but it's part of the original plan,
It was
right?
part of the Riverfront Development Concept
Right.
Plan, correct. There has been talk about moving it down towards the interpretive center.
So the
more
Riverwalk?
Closer towards the Riverwalk, yes. They've been floating some ideas back and forth, and it just has not been finalized yet.
Mhm.
So who's going to make the determination? The planning board?
A combination of the planning board and your board.
So they're going to report back to us with a discussion about,
Yes, any
Moving it?
changes to the Riverfront Development Concept Plan will come back before your board for review.
Is that part of the discussion on Thursday night?
It's part of the 3 changes, yes. I don't know if they're ready to discuss that yet, this coming Thursday, but it is still out there as an open item.
Okay.
are there any concepts on the bottom of Beekman, the traffic circle? Is there any conceptual drawings or
Yeah,
ideas?
There was a concept that was presented to the planning board last month. They requested further review of that at this point. They were not satisfied with the initial concept plan for it.
The planning board wasn't satisfied?
Correct. At least
Are
that
we
was
going
the
to get a chance to
consensus.
see it? I don't remember seeing anything.
Yeah,
Just keep in mind that the planning board approves, we did the special permit, and everything else ends up in front of the planning board unless there's some
Right.
change from the special
No, I
permit.
understand that.
And
Just-
so I think we
It's
can
kind of
always,
an important item for the village.
we can always reach out and say we'd like to see in it.
No, I didn't know if
see
they
in it
intended
weigh in.
on doing that, yeah.
Yeah, so there was, the original plan for that area was very generic at the planning stage, at the riverfront development planning stage. It's now the planning board's purpose to develop that in more detail.
Mhm.
So they were not really satisfied with the initial presentation for it. But I'll be glad to.
I can reach out to Marjorie.
Well, I could share it with the board as soon as it comes in.
That'd be great.
Sure.
Any other questions for Mr. McCarthy? Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome.
As I announced at the beginning of the meeting, we have what I think will be, and I hope will be, a really interesting presentation from Norman Drummond from the Westchester County Planning Department, former ambassador to the Ukraine, to Portchester. And we know we've got a tight schedule this evening, so
Yes, thank you.
welcome back. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we look forward to the presentation. And this is something that is obviously critical to a village like ours, well, to all villages and cities. So, welcome. Take it away, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for welcoming
Thanks.
me back here. I've already been, as you mentioned, I do have a fairly tight schedule. At 6 o'clock, I met with the Housing Opportunity Commission, and at 9 o'clock, I have to be at the town of Yorktown. So, but at least it's on my way home, so it
Well,
works out, not to
it was
worry.
nice seeing you, Norma, and
And this morning, I met with Urban County Council, so I had a chance. And Anthony was there, yes, exactly, in Mamaroneck. So the census, I can't stress enough how important it is to Westchester County and to every municipality in Westchester because of the impact of making sure everybody gets counted. Getting people counted was not something we worried about in the 2010 census, but I'm going to actually take you through a couple of specific examples about why I, as the Commissioner of Planning for Westchester County, am concerned about our ability to get every person counted this time around and really what its impact is. So I want to take you through some basic geography. I want a census geography, and I want to help you understand some of the census data itself that's been coming out that we've been looking at, the fact that we've been working on this for a couple of years already. We do actually have Owen Borda, who is a representative from the Census Bureau. He has joined us as well, so he's going to be able to answer any questions more related to what it is that they do.
what?
Yeah.
Come on,
Come on up. Thank you.
you can.
And there was a handout that you just received. I actually gave you a map that includes your village. There's a very small area in the village of Sleepy Hollow that we are specifically worried. If you see, I gave you Tarrytown. There's a much bigger area in Tarrytown that we're worried about. But you do have a small area bordered by Cortlandt Street, Beekman Avenue, pretty much down to the river almost, and then the village line. So there is an area that, according to the 2010 census, did get a less than average count. So there is a reason that we are specifically here in Sleepy Hollow. So anyway, why is the census important? It is mandated by the Constitution. We have been counting everybody every 10 years since 1790. This is not the first time the Census Bureau, thank you, has been doing this. It is extremely important for us to do it. It determines how many seats the state of New York gets in Congress, but it also more locally determines where the districts are for our county board of legislators. There are 17 legislators who each are supposed to have a district of approximately 50,000 people. Well, when you divvy out and separate out where the population is, that will draw the lines for where our legislators are. Also at risk, though, is according to a December 2018 study from the George Washington Institute of Policy, there's $880 billion of funding available based on where that's divvied up based on census data. The census estimates that for every person that is not counted, you are losing approximately $2,500 a year. So just 4 people, you're losing $10,000 a year. 400 people undercounted and you're losing $1 million a year, if that doesn't open your eyes in terms of how important this is. So it guides both public and private decision-making. And it determines things like CDBG with HUD data and other federal bureaus. What's new for 2020? This will be the first time that everybody will be responding, or most people will be responding to the census electronically. You will not get a form sent to your house by mail until the 4th mailing from the Census Bureau. All right? You will get an invitation to respond electronically with a code specific to your household, specific to your address, to your unit in the multi-unit building that you may live in. So this is going to be very, very different. And you can imagine how worried we are for older people like myself who, I have to rely on my kids to tell me sometimes how do I use the smartphone, okay? Imagine really our concern about people with disabilities, people who don't speak English, people who are older who may not even have internet access in their homes and their ability to respond. So we really need to look at this very in a multifaceted front in terms of making sure we're reaching out and making sure everybody knows the Census 2020 is coming. This will be the first time that the Census Bureau itself will now be able to talk to your neighbors and to building managers about, is that unit occupied or is that unit vacant? How many people live there? So if people don't respond to the materials that they've been sent, if they don't go online and respond, or if the 4th mailing, they don't respond to the form that gets sent to them, somebody's going to start knocking on their door. And after multiple times of knocking on their door, the Census Bureau staff, the enumerators as they're called, will have the ability to talk to your neighbors, will have the ability to talk to building managers, et cetera, to find out information about who might be living in units. And they do have the ability to use other records, but I want to stress it only works one way. The Census Bureau will be able to get Social Security records, they'll be able to get HUD records, but it does not go the other way. The Census Bureau cannot share any of the data that it has collected with any other federal agency. Census 2020 is, again, it's not the first time we're doing it. It is 9 questions, all right? Very clear, the citizenship question has been blocked. But it is, one of the things I wanted to stress was that years ago, many of us will remember that 1 in 10 households got a long form survey. They did away with that with the 2010 census because instead they created the American Community Survey. And so the American Community Survey, which is also done by the Census Bureau, and it's just one of the many surveys that the Census Bureau does all year round, but this American Community Survey, they actually survey approximately 300 households every month and ask a whole host of questions, a lot more detailed questions than just the 9 questions that we will be asking everybody to respond to. At the county, we're in the process of creating a Census 2020 website. I hope we'll have it out soon. We will have a sample of the questionnaire on there. It is actually available on the Census's website right now. So if anybody wants to see exactly what the 9 questions are, what's your name, where do you live, how old are you, what your address, what your age is, what your race and ethnicity are, what your relationship is for the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th person that live in that household to the first person, and whether you own or rent your home. All right, so there are 9 questions. That's all we're asking people to do. The more detailed questions and the more detailed data that the Census Bureau estimates and pulls together is really based on the ACS, the American Community Survey data. Census geography, I really want to start to stress the confidentiality, and part of that starts with census geography itself. The lowest level of census geography is a block. When you think of very practically a city block, one side of the street, going down a block, going down another block, going back, and coming back in a square, that is a block. So the person who lives across the street from you is not in the same block as you are, unless perhaps you live in a cul-de-sac or there's some other anomaly there. Realistically, it is going to be very, very difficult for somebody to figure out any single person or any single household's data because of the confidentiality and the layout of the geography. The people who live across the street from you are in different blocks, may end up in different block groups and in different census tracts. All right, so the lowest level of geography is a block. The Census Bureau does not release any data at the block level. All right, because it is what it is and it might only have a handful of people in it. They will not release that. What they do, the lowest level that they really look to use is the block group level. And the block group level is a group of blocks that ultimately has anywhere between 600 and 3,000 people living in a block group. Our CDBG data, our HUD data comes out in block group level. The ideal for a block group is about 1,500 people. So again, you can't pick out any single household when you're talking about somewhere between 600 and 3,000 people. But more often than not, the census data is available on the census tract level. And the census tract level really can have anywhere between 1,200 and 8,000 people with an optimum size of about 4,000. So in terms of helping to help people understand the confidentiality level, it is so impossible to be able to pick out a particular household because of just the way the geography works. And census tracts themselves in every county start from the south, head to the north. So our lowest census tract numbers start in Yonkers and work their way north. This is the number one reason why I am worried about making sure Westchester has an accurate count. In the summer of 2018, the county planning department, because we are a New York Census affiliate, we started working with the Census Bureau to look at addresses. And again, remember I said every household is going to get their own code? So we had to work with the Census Bureau to identify in every home how many units there were and what their address was, whether it was basement apartment, whether it was living over the garage, whether it was the whatever, number 1, number 2, A or B. We had to work with them to create that. We reviewed 370,000 housing unit addresses. I can tell you officially in Westchester County, there are 345,885 housing units in Westchester County. We found 24,000 addresses more than there are officially housing units. That in and of itself is the difference between Westchester County being under 1 million people and over 1 million people. That is a big issue. And so if there are 24,000 units, many of them may very well be illegal units. We don't know, we don't care, that's not our issue. Our issue is making sure that the people who live in these units are counted. One of the other things we had to do last year, because again, the county planning department does a lot of work behind the scenes, and I should have started by saying, by the way, that the Census Bureau has been working on the 2020 census since 2011. Imagine how much technology had to get built to be able to let you respond online, to be able to let you use your cell phone, to be able to have however many languages, 15 languages available, and then 56 to 59 languages where they have guidance available for everybody. But one of the things that we had to actually do, and where we found errors, was the boundaries of our municipalities in Westchester County. I'm just giving you one example here. This is the city of New Rochelle on the left, the town of Mamaroneck in the middle, and the village of Larchmont on the right. The blue is where the Census Bureau had the boundaries for these 3 municipalities in this one particular area. The white is where the actual boundary really is. So in fact, the city of New Rochelle was getting credited with a portion of the population of the town of Mamaroneck. The town of Mamaroneck was being credited with a portion of the village of Larchmont. So we had to correct that. So that's one of the things that we do behind the scenes, like the addresses. We look at the data, send it in to the Census Bureau. We also looked at census tracts themselves. Remember I told you there was an optimum census tract of about 4,000 people. Several census tracts in Westchester are getting on the larger size, and so the Census Bureau asked, could they split certain census tracts? We went to some municipalities. I'll give you one example, the city of Peekskill, where there are 2 census tracts that are on the larger side, and asked whether they would recommend splitting them. And in that case, they actually said no, they didn't want to see the split. If after the census, the numbers show that the population is larger, then they would agree to it. But it's easier for them to compare and look at the growth and what's happened, how demographics have changed when the census tracts stay the same. So in those 2 specific instances in the city of Peekskill, that we recommended that they stayed the same. Another thing that we had to do, and we just finished this up on September 30th, was what we call census designated places. Many of you know we have the bigger municipalities, but then you also have very close by here in the town of Mount Pleasant, you've got Valhalla, you've got Hawthorne, you've got Thornwood, you've got these other hamlets, you've got other places. And so the census works on recognizing that some municipalities want the data specific to those areas because they're not official towns, there's no official municipal borders to them. So the census defines those as census designated places. So in this case, we looked at all the previous ones that existed, but then also worked with specifically, I'll give you one example because Clinton is here, the town of Newcastle that specifically asked to have Chappaqua and Millwood identified this time around as census designated places so that they can look specifically at the data for those 2 areas. very different than the rest of the town of Newcastle, but very important to the community. So the census, as I said, they started working on this in 2011, but where are we now? The census right now is in an education phase, which is why I am trying to get out to as many municipalities as possible to tell you that the census is coming in less than 6 months. And part of this also, the Census Bureau is hiring and to get the word out to your local residents that they may very well be interested in getting a job with the Census Bureau. This, next Monday, in fact, October 22nd, is Census Recruitment Day. The Census Bureau is hoping to get 22,000 people to apply for jobs across the country next Monday alone. These are people who will be able to work weird hours or odd hours or nights and weekends, so you can still work your full job. They're paying $21 an hour in the Westchester area, so it is actually a nice salary there to be able to do that if you can, have the time on the nights and weekends, unlike me where I have to get out to municipalities at nights and weekends. But that aside, they are looking, who are you more
Anthony,
likely to
Can you write her a check for $21, please?
Who are you more likely to respond to when somebody comes knocking at your door? Somebody who maybe they live in New York City, or somebody who lives here in Sleepy Hollow. How great would it be if we could get people from Sleepy Hollow hired by the Census Bureau to be able to go to and knock on those households that might have been afraid or didn't know what to do with that code that they got in the mail. So we're really hoping that people will hear this message and will go and apply for the jobs. The Census Bureau warns there is a long lead time associated with hiring people, but they also need to do training. The training will start in January and February. They will actually start counting people in January. There are people that live in the remotest parts of Maine and Alaska where they literally need to get to these remote villages by person and go out and count people. So they are going to start counting in January for those remote areas. But more likely in Westchester, they're going to be starting in February and March because they think of all the college dorms, all the assisted living facilities, the prisons, our hospitals, a lot of those what we call group quarters, a lot of those facilities where somebody else will be actually providing the data on the people that live there. I have 4 children. I can't count a single one of them, and 3 of them are students, believe it or not. But my son and his wife are married. They'll count themselves in their own housing unit. My daughter is in Washington, D.C. in college. She lives in a dorm. The dorm's going to count her. The school will actually provide her data. My 2 other older daughters are in graduate school. One's in Salt Lake City and one's in Boston. They are in private housing units. So they'll be counting themselves. But think about it. They're 26. 10 years ago, they were 16. They never had to respond to a census. So think of that whole group of population that never had to respond to a census before and now does. So we have to do a lot of educating out there to tell young people, old people, they really college students and parents of college students how you count those folks. If you have college students who go to the community college and live in your house, yes, you do count them. All right? But again, I don't get to count any of my children. And just fun factoid for New York State, we actually found out that more students commute in to New York State than commute out. So we actually benefit in New York State from the population because we've got such great schools, particularly in the New York City area and in Westchester County, of course. But anyway, so we do benefit from that. But one of the most undercounted populations is children under 5. So to the extent that we can get the message out, we think it's because they're not in school yet, so who worries about them? But we know that there are birth records. Health department gets birth records for every, birth certificate that gets issued. So that's how the Census Bureau can see the disconnect. They were able to see that children under 5 were in fact really, really undercounted last time around. So even just getting the message across to parents that children under 5, but persons who are disabled, persons who are older and may not have access to the internet, there's a really whole category of people that we are worried about getting the information collected. So as I said, we're in the educational phase right now, and the count will actually begin early next year. 95% of the households in the country will get their invitation to respond to the census by mail, and they will hopefully respond electronically. 5%, there are some specific populations that the Census Bureau has identified ahead of time that will in fact get the survey right away. Some of them probably are more like senior populations, but they're 95% of the population. Again, my 26-year-olds are likely to respond to it on their smartphone because you know, they're not home often enough for them to be able to worry about doing it from there. Me, I'll probably do it the typical way on my own computer at home, that sort of thing. 1% is going to get visited by a census taker right up front because, again, they live in the most remote areas of this country, so they've got to be able to get to them. The first mailing, well, let me start. Census Day is April 1st, 2020. By April 1st, you will have gotten 3 mailings from the Census Bureau, and you will not have gotten the form in the mail to you. The first mailing is going out March 12th. The second mailing is going out March 16th. The third is March 26th. Finally, if you have not responded, the fourth mailing will go out on April 8th with the form in the mail to you. But you're going to get a postcard. How many of us look at our mail every day and throw out those postcards? Because it's, you know, you're going to get a postcard in the mail with that code on it. Well, the postcard may not have the code on it, but you're going to get a code reminding you to respond. The initial letter will actually have the code, and that will be a little bit more information. But we've got to think of how many multifamily building owners we have to let them know that these mailings are coming. All right, that's, you know, the Census Bureau, we were looking at the updated website last week, and there are actually flyers on there for property owners, for landlords and things. We're going to be working with the Building Realty Institute to make sure we get these flyers out and they start posting them by mailboxes early next year. So, again, why else am I worried? Listen to this part. So anyway, in 2000, the Census Bureau, in advance of every census, does a survey. It's the Census Barriers, Attitudes, and Motivators Survey. They want to know, they ask people right up front, are you going to answer the census, and if so, why? Why not? What are your concerns? What do you know about the census? There's 61 questions that they ask people. They send this survey out 2 years before the census to 50,000 households. They got a response of only 17,500, but it was 61 questions, so I'll give people credit for that. In 2008, 14% of the people who responded to that survey said they were not going to answer the census. In reality, 24% of the population did not respond to the census, an additional 10%. In 2018, 33% of the population said they were not going to respond to the census. If you add another 10% onto that, that's 43% of the population says they're not going to respond. Now, I will give it credit to the fact that in 2018, the citizenship question was not resolved. So that may be higher than it would be today based on the fact that there was a lot of uncertainty about whether that citizen question would be on there. The fact that it's now been resolved, we hope, means more people would respond. But can you imagine if 43% of the population does not respond? Yes?
Just to clarify for everybody, how was it resolved? Because not everybody knows.
In terms of, what it means is if you don't respond by mail, then somebody had to go to your house to collect the information.
I'm talking
on
about
you.
the citizenship.
Oh, okay, so this, I did cover that a little earlier. It has been blocked. That question will not be on. Normally, you would have gotten a census questionnaire with 10 questions, and now it is only 9 questions.
So anybody's here, living here with an address in the post office can fill out the census
Correct.
form.
Anybody living in a housing unit will not have to answer a question about whether they are a citizen or not. That is not being asked. Okay, the question was in fact blocked. But again, we're really concerned if 43% of our county residents do not respond to the census, or any municipality, 43% do not respond. So other questions that they asked, because again, this helps to inform us with how do we get the message out. Only 79% of the people who responded to the survey said they were familiar with the census. That's 21% of the population that didn't know what the census was about. Again, think of my 26-year-olds who didn't have to do it last time around, but they probably knew what the census was about, okay? But think of how many citizens have been naturalized in the last 10 years. They might not know there's a census every 10 years and that it's mandated. So there's a lot of education that needs to be done up front in advance of the months coming for the census. One of the questions they asked was, if you're not going to respond to the census, why not? No surprise, apathy, they could care less. Concerns about data confidentiality, fear of repercussions. Again, this was before the citizenship question was resolved. Distrust of the government, and what's in it for me? Okay. They were also asked, though, if you are going to respond to the census, what would motivate you to respond to the census? 94% of the population says if it benefits hospitals and healthcare and fire departments, that would motivate them to respond. 92% says police departments and roads and highways. Again, I'm not sure I would build a marketing campaign around police departments just because of the citizenship issue. But that information tells us that our marketing should be focused on showing fire trucks and road repairs and other things to make the connection for people that their responding to the census means more money for roads, for healthcare, for fire departments, for schools and education. So if this is what motivates people, we need to show them the images and let them know, in fact, it does result in more money for those things. So why am I here? You are not the only areas that have a little shaded in area in the county. Look at the county as a whole. Earlier this year, the Rockefeller Institute did a map, or it created a listing of the 500 census tracts in New York State that they expect will have the least response. Westchester County has the distinction of having the #1 census tract. The census tract they feel will be the worst response. It's in the city of Yonkers. But the city of Mount Vernon had 11 census tracts on their list of 500. So there's certainly a real worry in Westchester, again, about our ability to get people counted. Now what we did for this map was we looked at the 2010 census, and we looked at which areas had a lower than average response rate. And so those are all the colored areas. And so there's like bizarre areas. There's a reason I'm going to Yorktown. Do you see that red area up at the top of the map? Yorktown has a really less than 50% response rate. You know, Bedford, actually, that's their prison, so there was a group quarters issue there, so, you know, we'll let them slide with that, but there is still an area around the prison that is certainly an issue. But look at the city of Mount Vernon. The city of Mount Vernon is very, very colored in at this point because, again, their response rate was so much lower than average. Mount Vernon had, in fact, the worst response. The village of Elmsford, though, was second. Not too far from here. More than 50% of the village is colored in the village of Elmsford. I visited them a couple weeks ago. But again, this is why we're worried, because getting the response rate, there are areas in all over the county, that had lower than average response rates. North White Plains was bright red, you know, in the town of North Castle. So there are areas, you know, that we really are worried about. So what are we doing about it? On April 1st of this year, County Executive Latimer created a complete count committee. The idea is for us to, for the first time ever, to really focus on what can we do to help local communities and local residents and people understand how important the census is. So this committee has now created 5 subcommittees within their own group, focusing on, you know, certain avenues which we believe are the most important. Number 1 is field operations and coordinating volunteers and events, making sure the Census Bureau knows all about our visits to the municipalities and farmers markets and all sorts of events where there's going to be lots of people there. Marketing and communications, how do we make messages? We've already reserved advertising space on our county buses. Starting January 8th, we'll have ads on the buses, which is why I was talking about what kind of images I want to use. But we also have the ability to use some bus shelters. And matter of fact, what we've done, because we're the planning department and we can do this stuff, we took the map of the areas, overlaid on this the bus lines, overlaid onto that bus shelters, and the numbers of the population, how many people get on and off at those bus shelters every day. Then we overlaid how many of those areas are predominantly Spanish speaking. So now I know not only where I get the greatest bang for my buck, if I can get 30 or 60 bus shelters and advertising on those shelters, but I also know which shelters I need to do advertising in Spanish and which ones would be better served in English. That's the sort of data level that we're looking at that we've never had to look at before. So again, getting to the complete count, youth and education, we're already reaching out to schools. Owen, I know, is reaching out to the school boards and the PTAs to be able to really start that conversation about, can the schools adopt a census week? Can they really focus their curriculum? The Census Bureau on their website has all different levels of curriculum about how you can incorporate the census into your classroom exercises. How many of you learned to recycle while you were in school? And how many of you learned because your daughter or son came home from school and said, Mom, you're supposed to recycle that? You know, didn't you know, the ocean gets filled up with all those plastic water bottles? You know, I will never forget, my daughter came home one day and said, Mom, sharing is caring. Only when, of course, it was important for her. Exactly. So, you know, think about how effective our children can be coming home from school and saying, do you know why it's important to respond to the census? Mom, did you respond to the census yet? So if we can get cooperation with the school districts to incorporate census curriculum and why it's important at all levels, then it brings that message, and that 26-year-old in 10 years won't have to wonder what the census is about because they will have learned it while they were in school. All right, so our youth and education is certainly an important subcommittee and focus for us. For those who are undocumented, they generally are going to look to somebody that they trust, and that may be a doctor, healthcare, maybe a faith-based organization, some community nonprofit organization, maybe where they go to get food, something. They're going to rely on somebody, and so we've certainly identified nonprofits, the faith-based and community-based organizations, as an important partner for us, because that's where many of the undocumented will go and might very likely trust when somebody says, it's okay, you can respond to the census. It's important that you do it. And then
Can I ask you
Yeah.
with that, are you also working with the libraries, I would
Yes,
assume?
yeah, actually,
Okay.
the Westchester Library System is part of our Complete Count Committee.
Okay.
One of the things that the libraries are looking to do is to see if they can extend their hours in the spring,
Right.
all right, in March and April, to have their computers available
That's
for
what I was
people to be
thinking,
able to do. But we're also working, there are lots of kids, high school kids, that are looking to volunteer. And so how great would it be if we can get those kids that know how to use technology to help the librarians, because they have other things to worry about. If we can kind of garner those kids and match them up, those kids that need to do community service hours. You know, if we can have them be available to help people in the libraries at different hours. All right, so yes, we're very definitely working on that.
I figured.
And again, seniors and persons with disabilities. I'm going to be back, I'm hoping in February or March. I want to visit every single senior center in this county because we have to do a lot of education to our seniors to help them understand, not just about the fact that they can respond by online, but when somebody comes to their door, what to look for, what to ask, what the fact that nobody will ever, from the Census Bureau, will ever ask for your social security number. They will never ask for financial information, but they will have ID. All right, and so what to ask for, what to look for, because unfortunately our seniors have been preyed upon by, you know, people without scruples. That's it. So, questions?
Are you going to have a link to those, or can we put a link to the job applications on the village website?
See, that's why Owen's here.
I'm here for that. Hi. Actually, we have plenty, I have some material to give you. For the job information, we would like you to put a link. We'd like you to use your social media to advance it. And in the week of October 20th, we're having a recruitment week. And if there's a place in town that we could run a recruitment, it can be bilingual, and we'll send staff to set up a table and help people apply for jobs right there and then. So if we can make that work out, we're doing that in Ossining, we're doing it in a lot of other places. It would be great for us to be here with you.
I think I'd love to do that. So we'll ask Mr. Giacchio and Ms. McCarthy-Tompkins to figure out a spot and how to coordinate. Okay.
Talking
Yeah.
about this, the seniors, is there a way that we can coordinate something maybe with the senior center? I mean, I know about the ID, but there's a lot of tricky people out there too. So if something's mocked up and they're not going to trust it,
Right.
perhaps.
And
And I know you know
We
that.
totally agree with that. So
so-
again, to the extent that there are computers available in senior centers or not, maybe we can ask the
Maybe-
schools to even open up a computer lab, or the libraries, like you said, to stay open later, to make some kind of connection, some place where there is a bank of computers where we can encourage seniors to go.
No, maybe we can, do. I mean, our senior center, I mean, that's a great community spot. And
right.
maybe we can work something out so
They
that
also,
they have portals.
They don't need a computer. They can actually pick up the phone and call and respond by voice in their
Cool.
language. In our 12 non-English languages,
Okay.
they can dial the phone and talk to a person and actually verbally answer the response. So if they're keyboard phobic,
Sure.
people can, we have a number of support groups that are actually having their customers bring their phones on census day, and they're all going to call together to support each other to be sure that their group, so that's another way of, people sometimes just don't feel comfortable using the computer.
Or they don't have one.
And the volunteer can't fill out the census for them because the volunteer hasn't taken an oath to maintain confidentiality. So the person has to be able to do it themselves.
Any other questions?
Questions for?
Just a quick question.
Deanna Loha is our community liaison here in the village of Sleepy Hollow.
Okay. Sorry, I'm a little late. Maybe you already mentioned it on that and one of the questions.
Deanna knows that when she asks questions, she's supposed to say it into a microphone.
So one of the questions I want to ask the census maybe was respond or not, but the census reach out to community leaders through Westchester County? Because there's a lot of Westchester community leaders through each town has a community list, as well as Facebook pages that can be reached out to, and I'm sure I already had a conversation with them at meeting maybe a week ago with them, and we were talking about part of the census situation, and some of them have mentioned it, that they have reached out, some of them they not, but they are willing to collaborate, and I think if the census reach out to each of those leaders and they can put a video together, I think will be a great way to, especially to get in touch with the Spanish community, because some of them, they don't have the right answers, or they don't have the right questions, especially when it comes to the status that you just mentioned. Some of them are still in the area where we don't have the answer. So I will give you my contact information. I'll be happy to share my contact information with community leaders through Westchester County, that you can reach out to them, and happy to work with you.
Great, that's great. We are establishing, we have created quite a list already. We just haven't necessarily reached out to the nonprofit organizations and community-based organizations and community leaders. As a matter of fact, last week the county's complete count committee met, and we actually used the city of Mount Vernon as a case study because I showed you the map earlier, how concerned we are about the low response rate last time around in Mount Vernon. And so we had some community leaders from Mount Vernon actually there, and we use that as guidance for us to be able to, we're now going to put together a plan for each of the local complete count committees that have been established. There are 18 municipalities in Westchester that have already established complete count committees.
And you could be one.
You could be 19.
We would love, the Census Bureau would love for Sleepy Hollow to be the 19th. We come in and we help you organize this to be totally localized, to meet your local needs and meet with all your local leaders, and then feed back into the county level. So that's another thing that we're able to do for you.
Yeah, Tarrytown has already established one, so you could even combine together if that's appropriate or not. But again, the importance is for us, okay, I'm staying out of that. The idea is that it's not a lot of work, but you know the community best. One of the great things about people responding electronically is we're going to get the data a lot quicker about how people are responding and how they're not responding. And so if there are areas this time around where we see there are really low response rate, we'll have the ability to kind of mobilize those community leaders in each of these areas and say, what's there? How do we get to these people? How can we help the Census Bureau be most effective in going door to door and getting the responses? That data, because people are responding electronically, the data is going to be available a lot quicker this time around. So it's going to be something that will help the community leaders as well as us to be able to, and to help the Census Bureau to get the most effective results that we can.
We're looking forward to working with you guys. Look forward to seeing you come back too. Okay?
Yep, no problem.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'm off to Yorktown.
Have a safe trip. To the clerk. Okay, we're going to continue with our department reports, and next up is the fire department. Chief? Good night.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and Village Board. In the month of July, the fire department responded to 23 alarms, which was a combination of generals and minors. A general is an alarm that everybody responds to, and a minor is, it could be anything to a car accident. We respond with a engine and a rescue, or as outside odor of gas. In the month of August of 2019, we responded to 29 alarms. And that was a combination of generals, minors. We had 2 chief calls, which was just informational calls. I believe those 2 were, they closed some streets in Weber Park for the gas mains. We had some mutual aid calls to Croton. And we had a wake and a funeral for one of our ex-chiefs, and 2 parades. In September, we had 21 alarms, and that was generals, minors. We had a standby for Nyack and West Nyack and Austin. We had a 9/11 memorial ceremony in Patriots Park. And we also had a alumni remembrance for the fallen veterans ceremony at Morris. And that's as far as we have for as alarms go. We have a evacuation drill coming up in August 22nd for Kendall, where we just observe them evacuating, and we put in our information. We have fire prevention for Morse and the Robin's Nest on October 30th, and we'll be holding our annual boot drive the next 2 weekends, the 19th to the 20th, and the 26th and the 27th. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go back to my announcements, which I'd postponed. Couple of things. I think the most exciting one is congratulations to Greg Semenza, Sleepy Hollow High School's first Nobel Prize winner. It's pretty cool. You go around the country and you see home of the fighting whatever and all the different teams and state champions in 2012. And I hope we see a sign up there that says home of Nobel Prize winner Greg Semenza. It was shared prize in physiology and medicine. Interestingly, he gave credit to his high school biology teacher for starting him on his path towards science and medicine. He now teaches at Johns Hopkins down in Baltimore, but I'm sure the high school will consider him as their own forever, as we all should. And I just think that's an incredibly exciting moment. So great for the high school. Teacher's name was Rose Nelson, by the way. So thank you, Ms. Nelson, for your work back then. It's paid off for the rest of the world. And hopefully we'll be able to recognize this in a more formal way. But a lot of things kind of pale in comparison to this. This is pretty cool, I have to say. I also wanted to note that our public hearing for the LWRP and our comprehensive plan are still open until next Tuesday for written comments. We've received a handful over the last week or so. Since we posted a red line version of the LWRP and the comp plan on our village website. So it's there for folks to be able to download and read. I would just ask people, as we did earlier this summer, if you're going to make comments on that, please read it and then make the comments. I think it'll be more helpful to us, certainly, to get those comments if you've actually had a chance to read what we're thinking of in terms of some proposed changes in the draft itself. I also want to note that when the public hearing does close, we have 60 days to act on that. So what you've seen is not necessarily the final draft. We can make changes to that and probably will in different ways in the coming weeks. I also wanted to note that we had an event on Friday unrelated to the evacuation of the high school, the evacuation drill anyway, with the Urban Land Institute. You may recall the ULI did something called the TAP report almost 2 years ago now. They came into the village with a team of professionals, did a very intensive 2-day study of our downtown, issued a really interesting report which is available here in Village Hall in a hard copy, and I believe is available on the village website as well. For folks who've spent a lot of time looking at the LWRP or the comp plan, the ULI report, the TAP report, will look really familiar if you haven't read it already. There's a number of things in that they recommended. The point of this one was to come back and say, okay, it's been almost 2 years. What have you done? What's happened? What's changed? What are the changes in the village since they were here? It was a very successful event, and I want to thank them again for doing this report for us. That leads us to public comments. If anyone wants to address the board, you may do so now. Please be reminded, we'll start here. Please reminded you're limited to 3 minutes. And please also remember that we have a second public hearing, public comment period towards the end of our meeting. Yes, sir.
May I make a public comment on the red line version?
Let me, as you know, we don't answer questions, but let me just answer that one up front, just in case anybody else does. You may address any subject that you wish to address. If you would like it to be a part of the official comments of the public hearing, you should submit them in writing as well. It's not that we're not going to hear them, because obviously we are, but I'm just cautioning you to, you may want to also submit those in writing. So your time has not started. Sir.
Mike Savitsky, 11 River Street. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for accepting the public comments regarding the marina and Rand's Landing. I see that that's been crossed out, and I know many people who spoke opposed a marina there are thankful for that. Now I need just to offer the board a couple of facts before they take this version any further. There's been some additions and some focusing on the pier at 11 River Street. I need the board to know, if they're not aware, that that pier is an illegal structure. The pier requires an easement. The easement in which it sits expired in 2012. And a resolution to that issue is far, far away. Fact number one. Fact number two, the resolution that allowed the amended special permit for 11 River Street had multiple conditions. One of those conditions were the developer was to provide a restoration to a pier that will have a serviceable life of no less than 30 years. There's no certification on that, and those pilings that the renovation was done on top of are anywhere from 50 to 80 years old. Nobody knows the life term of pilings in the Hudson River. Now, bring to mind that the issue we're having over at Ichabod at this point, that bulkhead was to have a 28-year serviceable life. It lasted 6 years, and again, there's no certification that anybody did that said it was going to last 28 years. Finally, not a fact, but through my investigation, I have found nowhere in Westchester County's county clerk's office filing of any easement for the Riverwalk, which is owned by the River House, given to the village of Sleepy Hollow, nor do I find any easement from the Riverwalk onto that pier. So, I would just like the board to be aware of those facts. Finally, supposedly in July 2020, the TZC folks are going to be vacating the area. The DEC, as soon as the River House gets some loose ends tied up, has agreed to aid in the design of an aquatic restoration of that area. The DEC considers that zone, that harbor, a disturbed area. And again, they've offered to help us with the design. I believe if the LWRP, the village, gets behind helping us with that restoration, it would be a far more noble cause than providing a dock and dine facility. Thank you. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to address the board? Yes, Sonia? I mean, Mrs. Monroe, pardon me.
Hello all, I'm Sonia Monroe. I live at 63 New Broadway. I've come before you to ask you to please plan for the inevitable. In 6 to 9 months, bike lanes will be opened on the new bridge, and bikers will be coming en masse in bicycle clubs across the bridge. And they'll see the sign Sleepy Hollow there, and they'll be curious, and they'll be hungry from all that biking, and they'll want to come down Route 9. They'll be coming in a critical mass. If there's nothing in Tarrytown, they will block up all the traffic. If they come to Sleepy Hollow beyond it, and we have bike lanes, we'll be able to release the traffic again. And the business will come our way instead of going to Elmsford or to Irvington. And that's what we want, right? So if we welcome them, this will happen, but we have to make those plans for those bike lanes. So I'm asking you, please reinsert bike lanes on Route 9 into the comprehensive plan. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, and sir.
This needs to go up. This doesn't come out of my 3 minutes, does it?
No.
I'll leave it.
Michael's going to help you out.
Thank you. My name is Jay Schultz. I'm here on behalf of Sleepy Hollow Manor Association, and this is in relation to the comprehensive plan. On the 10th of July, we submitted written requests for items to be included into the plan. And just to give you a little bit of background, these are items that our Manor Association vetted. We wanted to make sure that they were reasonable, achievable, and they had support or widespread support in our neighborhood. So we had kind of a tough criteria that we had to have unanimous approval in our board to get them on the list. That left only 3 items. We submitted in writing on the original deadline of the 10th of July. So you should have it as record. I do have a copy of it if you need a copy of it. And I guess after reviewing the red line version, it looks like none of those items were built in. So I guess we'd like to have the process reconsider, to have those items considered. I'm not going to go through them today. They are in writing and you have a copy of them. So I guess I just ask for our needs and considerations to be built in. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Jennifer Osfield. I'm also from the Sleepy Hollow Manor Association, here to reiterate what Jay has said and tell you about the process that we went through. And it was a lengthy process with our board, and like you said, we needed unanimous approval from our board members. We represent over 180 houses in Sleepy Hollow Manor, and we feel that it's important that we are heard. And like he said, we picked 3, and to have 3 that not only benefit Sleepy Hollow Manor, but benefit the village and the entire village. So we hope that you take a look at that again and really pay attention to it, because not only were we thinking how to improve the end of the village, but the village as a whole. So that was our mindset, and we'd like you to reconsider that and pay attention to what we proposed, and we'd like to see it back in there. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else like to address the board at this time? If not, just hold your thoughts until later on this evening, and we'll have another opportunity. And again, for the folks on the comprehensive plan, obviously we heard what you said. If it's important to you to have those comments as part of the record of the public hearing, please submit them in writing as well. Thanks.
So maybe we can have those just recircled from the ones that were just presented from Sleepy Hollow. Can we have that sent over to the board again? Just so it doesn't get missed.
Will
Since it's
redo
already
that.
been submitted.
So we'll move on to resolutions. We have 5. I want to add a 6th one. We heard this evening of a desire to have a boot drive from our fire department, and we need to approve a resolution authorizing them or allowing them to do the boot drive. Could we just start with that? If somebody could, I need somebody to move that we hold, that the Sleepy Hollow Fire Department be authorized to hold a boot drive on October 19th and 20th and October 25th and 26th from noon to 3 p.m. At Pearson Avenue and Route 9 and at Pecanico and Route 9.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? The resolution is approved. I don't know why you need boots, but that right? Okay. So please, folks, get out there and support our volunteer fire department, okay? They look after your lives and your property every day. Please give a little back. Okay, the more formal resolutions. Somebody want to start?
Resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow authorizing execution of the supplemental agreement with the New York State Department of Transportation for the Beekman Avenue Sidewalks project. Whereas the New York State Department of Transportation is providing $486,000 to construct sidewalks and ramps on Beekman Avenue in the Village of Sleepy Hollow, the project has been assigned PIN number 8761.50. And whereas the funding under Title 23 U.S. Code as amended calls for the apportionment of the cost of the project to be borne at the ratio of 80% federal funds and 20% non-federal funds. And whereas the Village of Sleepy Hollow desires to advance the project by committing 100% of the non-federal share of the cost of construction and construction inspection work. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow hereby approves the project, and recognizing that the funding works as a reimbursement grant, authorizes the village to pay 100% of the federal and non-federal share of the cost of construction and construction inspection work, or portions thereof, prior to submitting a request for reimbursement to New York State Department of Transportation. And be it further resolved that the sum of $200,000 is hereby appropriated from the capital fund, and an additional sum of $359,210 is hereby appropriated from the operating fund and made available to cover the cost of participation in the above phase of the project. And be it further resolved that in the event the full cost of this phase of the project exceed $559,210, the Sleepy Hollow Board of Trustees shall convene as soon as possible to appropriate the excess amount upon notification by the village administrator thereof. And be it further resolved that the village administrator, mayor, and treasurer are hereby authorized to execute all necessary agreements, certifications, or reimbursement requests for federal aid on behalf of the Village of Sleepy Hollow with the New York State Department of Transportation in connection with the advancement, approval, and administration of the project. And be it further resolved that a certified copy of this resolution be filed with the New York State Commissioner of Transportation by attaching it to any necessary agreement in connection with the project. And be it further resolved that this resolution shall take effect immediately. So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Resolution's approved. Someone would take the next one?
Sure. Resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow authorizing execution of the supplemental agreement with the New York State Department of Transportation for the SRTS Pedestrian Improvement and Safety Education Project. Whereas the New York State Department of Transportation is providing $220,000 for pedestrian improvements at the traffic lights on the intersection of Beekman Avenue and North Washington Street and education of school students. The project has been assigned PIN number 8761.15. Look very similar to the other number. And whereas the funding under Title 23 U.S. Code as amended calls for appropriation of the cost of the project to be borne at the ratio of 100% federal funds with no requirement on non-federal funds. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow hereby authorizes the project and recognizes that the funding works as a reimbursement grant, authorizes the village to pay 100% of the federal share of the cost of construction and construction inspection work or portions thereof prior to submitting a request for reimbursement to the New York State Department of Transportation. And be it further resolved that the sum of $165,000 is hereby appropriated from the operating fund and made available to cover the cost of participation in the above phase of the project. And be it further resolved that in the event that the full cost of this phase of the project exceed $165,000, the Sleepy Hollow Board of Trustees shall convene as soon as possible to appropriate the excess amount upon notification by the village administrator thereof, and be it further resolved that the village administrator, mayor, and treasurer are hereby authorized to execute all necessary agreements, certifications, or reimbursement requests for the federal aid on behalf of the Village of Sleepy Hollow with the New York State Department of Transportation in connection with the advancement, approval, and administration of the project. And be it further resolved that a certified copy of this resolution be filed with the New York State Commissioner of Transportation by attaching it to any necessary agreement in connection with the project. And be it further resolved that this resolution shall take effect immediately. So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Resolution's approved.
I know, I went out of sequence.
I don't care, it's somebody. I
Be
can't
it
do
resolved
it.
that Election Law 4-106(2) requires all villages whose March elections are conducted by the County Board of Elections submit to the County Board of Elections a list of polling places by November 17, 2019. And be it resolved that the Village of Sleepy Hollow has the following 9 election districts and the village election to be held on Wednesday, March 18, 2020. Be it further resolved that the following polling places be open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. on Election Day. First election district, Union Hose Company Firehouse, corner of Cortlandt Street and Cedar Street, Sleepy Hollow, New York. Second election district, Union Hose Company Firehouse, corner of Cortlandt Street and Cedar Street, Sleepy Hollow, New York. Third election district, Firehouse Headquarters, 28 Beekman Avenue, Sleepy Hollow, New York. Fourth election district, Rescue Hose Firehouse, 11 Lawrence Avenue, Sleepy Hollow, New York. Fifth election district, Rescue Hose Firehouse, 11 Lawrence Avenue, Sleepy Hollow, New York. Sixth election district, Phillipsburg Manor Restoration, 381 North Broadway, Sleepy Hollow, New York. Seventh election district, Fraternal Order of Eagles, 322 North Broadway, Sleepy Hollow, New York. 10th Election District, Phillipsburg Manor Restoration, 381 North Broadway, Sleepy Hollow, New York. 11th Election District, the Commons Building, Kendall on Hudson, 1010 Kendall Way, Sleepy Hollow, New York. So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed or abstentions? Resolution's approved.
Resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow accepting the resignation of Public Works Superintendent. Whereas Wayne Ballard, by the attached letter dated October 1st, 2019, and effective October 1st, 2019, submitted his resignation letter from the Sleepy Hollow Department of Public Works. And whereas the said resignation letter must formally be accepted by the Village of Sleepy Hollow Board of Trustees, and whereas the village, by resolution number 07/138/03, dated July 15, 2003, adopted a policy for employee termination and rehire. And now therefore be it resolved that the village accepts the resignation of Wayne Ballard by the attached letter dated October 1st, 2019, and effective October 1st, 2019, and finds that the termination/rehire policy of July 15, 2003 applies. And be it further resolved that a copy of the policy is forwarded to, and a copy be placed in Wayne Ballard's personnel record with proof of service. So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Resolution's approved.
Resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow approving the action of the Board of Fire Wardens. Whereas the Board of Fire Wardens of Sleepy Hollow Fire Department at a recent meeting took the following actions. Union Hose Company number 2, Christopher Murray has resigned as an active member with the company and has been placed on the associate list. Glenn Clammy was elected first lieutenant, Eli Diaz to second lieutenant, and Eswal Juarez to the position of third lieutenant. Eswal Juarez has been passed as a driver on engine 86. He has completed training with the chief driver. So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? The resolution's approved. Our congratulations to all the folks on their promotions at Union Hose. In our old business, new business, we have a presentation from Claire Davis from the Environmental Committee, from our EAC. I would say action, activity.
Yes. Showing that it's double-sided. I'm old. I work better with a mouse.
What's a mouse?
See if I can get this. Nope. This. It's coming out with this, I don't know. Ah, it's the presenter. All right, I was here months ago with, after last April, I believe it was, I think I came here in May, after we did a demo project at Lawrence and Beekman. And I invited Nana to come, Nana Welch, who's on our committee, because until a couple months ago, she lived on Lawrence Street for quite a few years, and she participated in our walkability, she and her husband in our walkability survey, and subsequently joined our committee. And she knows more about that intersection than anybody that I could refer to. So this is the intersection that we're looking at. And this is a typical situation. So it gives you an idea of why we wanted to do something here. This is somebody parking to go into the liquor store. Undoubtedly, this happens quite a bit. Blocking the sidewalk, blocking the crosswalk, blocking it from both directions. And you can see the striping here from the fire lane there. So this isn't working. So below the fire hydrant, I thought my cursor would work on this, but it's not.
So what are you saying, because the car is not parked correctly, or the
No, there's
striping
no
is
parking there.
incorrect?
There's no parking there.
So, okay, no, I understand that.
But we're showing the situation when people come to that intersection,
Yes.
and this is why one of the reasons we wanted to address it, there are people who need to cross here,
Yes,
and so.
cross on Lawrence.
Yeah, I'll go
Clear.
on.
No, that's
Let
fine.
me, if I may,
I'm-
I think it would be helpful if you said, hey, guys, this is what I want you to do at this particular intersection,
Yes,
and here's why.
okay,
And then it's more context, because we're not necessarily sure
that's what
where.
follows. I didn't need to spend that much time on that. But this is what the demo project looked like. And I'm showing this to you so you can see the difference in what we're proposing now. The demo project had the parking space closer to the police department. You can see where the cones are, taken out, and the crosswalk going across to the other
Side of the
ramp,
street.
curb ramp. And so the white stripe shows where we would like to move it to and take out, put back in that parking space, leave the parking space in where the cones are, and take out the parking space where the car is shown there now.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, the green is what you're saying, you want to extend the sidewalk?
The green would be an extension, but we're proposing now a mountable curb on that side of the street. And I'll show you a picture of what that would look like.
Okay.
So this is something that was discussed with the fire department. It's what they agreed to at the foot of Beekman. So I just want to, this is another view of what the crosswalk would look like. On the north side of Washington would be a mountable curb with a ramp closer to the sidewalk, and on the south side of Beekman would be a raised curb extension with the ramp at the end of the curb extension. Not
Claire,
shown.
can I ask something? Just so that I can catch up, because maybe I missed it in some of the previous meetings. Why are we zeroing in on this spot? Is there a situation where there were accidents? Is there?
Yes, this was
Okay,
one
s-
of the high accident
okay.
places.
I just-
This intersection and Pecanico, and the one at DePeyster and Cortland, I believe, had the highest rate of accidents when we did our walkability
Sure.
workshop.
Okay.
And so our report called for doing this, but now we're back with something that we believe resolves the issues that we had with the fire department when we first did the demo. And I believe Ken asked me to try and resolve those issues and come back when we did, and that's what took so long.
Who at the fire department did you work with?
John, you want to?
Yeah, I've been involved with Claire and her committee on this project, and I'm going to let her complete a presentation, but we were out there yesterday with John Corzilius, fire chief, and Richie Gross, and we had discussions that, you know, I mean, it's, I wanted their input, obviously. We had the police chief out there the other day, and, you know, we have to be all on the same page for this. But what I would just, as a preface, say, there on this side of the street, we have Village Hall, we have the Life Center, where a lot of young kids go after school. We have the police station, we have the court, which if you're here during the week, it gets busy there sometimes, you know? So there's what we used to call critical buildings on this side of the street that, I mean, at present, there really isn't a proper crosswalk. So modern street design incorporates these bump outs now. The fire department requested that the curb be mountable on the Lawrence Avenue side, because if they make the turn sharp, you know, it's not gonna break the granite like we have in some other situations.
Sure.
If you look down at the Edge project, the traffic circle has a mountable curb. They even installed one on the south side of the street there. It's rather
Okay.
large, but it makes sense when you see it.
Yeah, no,
So if a truck comes up off River Street and makes the right turn onto Beekman by the traffic circle, if it hits the curb, it doesn't destroy it.
Okay, that's a good-
But it still lets pedestrians cross the street at a crosswalk that's much safer. That's the picture we're talking about.
Yeah,
Okay.
Clara, can you go?
It shortens the
can you go
crosswalk, so
back
that's what
one?
we're talking about. So tonight, we just passed 2 resolutions about Beekman Avenue sidewalks and Pecanico and Beekman. You know, I mean, as a village, we're seeking money to make improvements for safety and redesigning the sidewalks. I think now is the time to incorporate these things to our existing sidewalks. So I worked hard with Claire on this, you know, the last couple of weeks, and
Yes.
I mean, I fully support it. I'm going to let her finish, but as far as
fine.
background of
Yeah,
village
and
officials
that was
who've
probably
been
more from
brought in
mine,
the loop, I
appreciate
think
that.
it's a good thing. Here's the thing. I'm just going to say one more thing. They asked for 5 or 6 of these, whatever it
Yes.
was. I said, let's start with 1. Let's do 1. Let's see how it works for a few months. And if we can accomplish that, I think people will see that they are effective and they work and they're safe. So I'm not asking for 3 or 4. I'm just asking for 1 tonight. And I think Claire has narrowed her search, so to speak. So
Temporary.
I just,
temporarily, she never gives up.
I have a question. So the reason you're taking out the parking spot on the other side of the street is so when the truck turns, it has enough space?
No, the reason why we're taking out a parking spot on the Village Hall side of the street, which would be the south side, is because we want to make a
crosswalk.
extension of the sidewalk there with a handicap accessible pad and ramp,
Okay.
which is the proper design.
Okay.
It also will prevent cars from driving through the crosswalk to get to the spot closer to the police station. So I think it's a pretty good design. The only person I haven't run it by in the village is Sean, so we can talk more about it if it's something that he picks up on. One other thing about parking spots, and I think we're in a good place right now with parking spots. We just picked up about 16 on the Beekman Avenue Bridge down the street. So again, timing may be good here. If we lose a parking spot, I don't think there'll be as much of an outcry. And, you know,
Well, you also have. the
Yeah, I was
parking
just trying to understand the purpose of eliminating
Yeah.
it, so, thank you.
Can I?
it's going to shorten the crosswalk.
It's going to shorten the crosswalk, but also if you look at this drawing where it's easier to see where the driveway is, that's next to the Life Center, that goes into that little strip mall,
Yeah.
that doesn't have parking. A car moving east can see a pedestrian if that
Right.
parking space is removed. We put the curb extension there, probably have to angle the crosswalk slightly because of, you don't want to intrude on the fire lane that's across the street. But that way, you can keep the other parking space, and it doesn't block the vision of any driver moving east. They can see anybody that's walking out there.
Got it.
So, quick question. What's the size of the bump out in terms of feet going across? Because we've got a 2-way street, and just in this one area, there's gonna be a little bit of a pinch point. So I'm wondering, is that gonna be a challenge for the motorists? Like, all of a sudden, they got a pinch point.
It's not really a pinch point because it won't go out past where the striping for the parking space is.
So,
That's where a
Cars
typical
would've been
curb
anyway.
extension would go. It would go out that far, and the only thing that would affect drivers in that sense is not the size, not the width of the travel lane, but psychologically, if they see this, it may give them a feeling that it's narrower, but it's not. It's the same travel lane width that it was before.
The bump out is not intended to be driven over, correct?
Not on the south side.
No, on that side.
On the other side it is?
On the north side, I'll show you. On the north side, because of the issue with turning radius from the fire trucks, what we're recommending is a mountable curb. That would be very much like this.
A mountable curb is about 10 inches wide and 6 inches high. So it allows a truck to go over it without damaging the pavement.
It's in effect now and allowed the area around the circle to have narrower lanes that weren't accommodating the full fire truck turning radius. And I believe that someone from the fire department worked on that committee. That's what I was told. So you can see here that the curb ramp is by the sidewalk. And that tells you how much lower the cobblestone area is. And yet, it's still a deterrent from a car, a driver in a car, turning over that. They see it, visually it presents an obstacle, but it doesn't present any damage issues to vehicles. And this is another view of this. This is John's photo. And it gives
Good
you a
photo,
closer up
John.
view of what the ramp looks like and the mountable curb.
Yeah.
Now,
Makes
these
sense.
photos are from many different people. So, and that's pretty much
Well, this
the
is
end.
pretty new, so a lot of people in the village haven't seen this yet unless you live down there.
Right.
But this is modern street design. So I go back to the resolutions we passed tonight. It's like buying a television with tubes in it now. Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of the drawings of the street design. We still have time to modify those and put some of these changes in.
So the design would be something similar to what we're looking at now, like pavers. You're not going to have a green thing.
No.
on the street.
No, green is, that's just a quick
Shadow.
fix, a
That's a
Band-Aid
shadow.
over the photo to show you what
Shading.
it looks like. And I can't even do that. Someone had to do it for me.
So if you notice, if you go up the street to Hudson a little bit, I don't know if we have a photo of that, Claire. They're actually doing 2 bump outs on the
No, I
west
don't have
side,
that.
on the west side
Yes.
of on the west side of Hudson Street. And
that
you can
truck
see already
is
it's
up there.
shaping up, but it's slowing traffic down. Because when you get to the bump outs, you psychologically as a driver slow down. Because without those, that's like a chute into a nice speedy traffic circle where you can take your fast car. So that's one little element that they've incorporated down there. And I know Claire still isn't happy because there isn't a cutout on the other side of the street, but,
Well, it doesn't have to be a bump
right,
out.
I understand. We'll
All
try
I
to
want
work
is
on
a
it.
crosswalk.
But these are the things that, you know, if you look at it and you say, that's
Yeah.
good design, that's safe, it shortens the
Yes.
crosswalk.
And it, like you said, the timing is really
Right.
appropriate.
And it's ADA compliant, which we're not now.
It's a big improvement to our streetscape. And, you know, we'll move on to the other intersections when we see how this works out.
It's like the speed bump, you guys are gonna want a bunch of them.
So you're proposing to do this when we're doing the sidewalks?
Pardon me?
The proposal
Well,
is
no,
to
I
do
would like
this-
to see these done, if I had my way, I'd like to see these done before the winter, so we can get feedback from our DPW about snow removal, and I'd like to
Could
make
we
it
do
safe
that?
as soon as possible,
I
you
mean,
know?
Yeah, I like that idea too.
So,
Let's find
Craig
out
down
what
at the
way
Edge
it
project,
really works.
Craig down at the Edge project told me he would put me in touch with the contractor, just to get a price for square footage, which we haven't mapped it out yet. We're not engineers, this isn't engineered yet, but I think we could get a ballpark figure on what this would cost.
Well, the last time I think it snowed on Halloween, so we better giddy up.
Yeah, right, so.
No,
Yeah, we had
Let's see
some
what we can do.
discussion about this when I first presented the recommendations from the walkability report. I just pulled this one up because it's easy to read. You can see the side in front of the Life Center on the south side of Beekman. You can see that it's shown to be angled. It's not maybe the exact size that it would be, but I don't think that it has to be as large as the one that's at the foot of Beekman near the circle to do that. But you have to angle it so that the snow machines and things like that can get around it. Of course, the street sweepers. And they've done this in many other places. And the ones that are done at 90-degree angles do not work. I heard nothing but complaints about them in the course of my planning career, but the angled ones, I believe, can work and do work. And that's the way to go at this
I
point.
think it sounds like a great idea.
Thank
So
you
there
for
is one
summing that
issue.
up.
It's a good.
There is one issue that we have to work out, which is drainage. So Beekman Avenue is downhill. So if there's we have to somehow,
Yeah, there's a
we
block.
might have to angle it
Yeah.
on the other side too, so water has a place to go.
That's when we get the engineer in, right?
right.
Yeah, so it doesn't collect in the angle there.
Right.
Yeah.
Sean, would you be willing to take a look when we, thank you.
So where does that leave us with this?
There's a consensus on the board that this is a good idea and that we will implement it as soon as we can.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work.
Thanks, Claire.
Yeah, thank you. Pray continue with your work. All right, Ms. McCarthy-Tompkins, do we have any communications other than the public comment, comments on the public hearing on the LWP and comp plan? Those have been distributed to the board. Obviously, if any others come in that aren't emailed to us directly, please make sure we get those. I have a couple of items that we need to discuss in executive session. That one is potential litigation, and I have a couple of personnel matters that we need to discuss as well. So can I get a motion to go in executive session for those purposes?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? All right, this is an executive session. I'm not sure if we're going to conduct any business after we come back. the executive session?
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Our executive session is over, and we're back in our regular board meeting. And we have a couple of resolutions to consider.
The following applications for seasonal help were sent, and the two candidates are Julio Sosa, 100 College Avenue. Do I have to give the address, or no?
Or you can just say Sleepy Hollow.
Sleepy Hollow, New York, and Rocco Cipriano from Irvington. The DPW, Richie Gross, has requested these individuals be hired for seasonal work at a rate of $16 per hour. No more than, how many hours is it?
Full-time.
Okay.
40 hours.
Okay. Not to exceed 4 months, effective immediately. These are seasonal workers. So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? We just note for the record that these positions are covered by our current approved budget. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Okay. Welcome aboard, gentlemen. We also, I need a resolution approving the village clerk, authorizing the village clerk to call for the police hiring list, the local list for people that would be hired and sent to the academy.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Those resolutions are approved. We'll move on to public comments. Does anyone wish to address the board? Hearing none, can I get a motion to end the meeting? Close the meeting? So moved. Second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you and good night.
I know,